50 years, the United States has relied upon airlift and aerial refueling to help achieve our nation's military, political, and humanitarian objectives. Today, people around the world know the Air Mobility Command is equipped and prepared to meet requirements worldwide. The concept of air mobility dates from World War I, when man's vision of transportation by air was little more than a dream. Near the end of the war, supplies were being dropped without parachutes to the famous Lost Battalion. It was a tentative beginning. In the 1920s, the Army Air Corps purchased commercially designed aircraft in an effort to improve the transportation of men and supplies. It was clear to some early aviators that the Air Corps might one day be able to deliver a payload anywhere in the world. When Navajo Indians were badly in need of food during a severe Arizona winter, the Air Corps quickly came to their aid. This was a pioneer effort in humanitarian airlift. And when winter rains caused unprecedented flooding in the eastern states, military aircraft were again called into action. 30 B-10 bombers flew over the swollen James, Potomac, Susquehanna, and Ohio rivers, dropping food, medicine, and clothing. Aviators also worked on extending the range of aircraft. The first successful demonstration of aerial refueling by the Army Air Service was in 1923. In 1929, after numerous improvements, the question mark demonstrated the practical value of in-flight refueling by establishing a world duration record for remaining aloft, 150 hours and 40 minutes. That same year, the Boeing Company and the Army Air Corps experimented with air-to-air refueling methods for cross-country flights. Despite the advances in aerial refueling procedures, political and military events in Europe and the Pacific temporarily halted further developments. Following the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor and America's entrance into World War II, the diversified capabilities of airlift were soon demonstrated. The Japanese were overrunning a succession of Pacific islands with little or no resistance. In an effort to stop the advance, troops were rushed to New Guinea. One regiment took 36 hours to make the trip by sea. Too long. The Army Air Forces, using 60 aircraft, airlifted an entire Australian infantry battalion to the battle zone in little over an hour. This proved airlift could provide the speed and flexibility needed to move Allied forces wherever and whenever needed. Military cargo carriers were finally developing an identity of their own. The Air Corps Ferrying Command had been formed in May 1941 to deliver aircraft from U.S. factories to the British. A year later, the command was redesignated Air Transport Command, ATC, to reflect the expanding role of military airlift. The vision? Air bridges connecting every corner of the world and every battlefront. In late 1942, ATC responded to its greatest challenge, an airlift operation over the formidable Himalayan mountains. Skeptics said flying the Himalayas, the hump, couldn't be done, and even if it could, the airlift could never move enough supplies to sustain the Chinese forces. The skeptics were wrong. By the end of the war, the courageous hump airlifters had delivered nearly 740,000 tons of war material, including an entire army, from India and Burma to battlefronts in China. When the Second World War ended in August 1945, a deep chill spread quickly over the victorious Allies as the first waves of the Cold War engulfed the world. The year 1946 witnessed the activation of the Strategic Air Command, a new organization intended to conduct long-range offensive operations in any part of the world. The creation of SAC ushered in an era of aerial refueling research and development. SAC's mission was global, but its World War II bombers were not. The first aerial refueling system used by SAC converted B-29s to either tankers or receivers. Within 2 short years, the first aerial refuelers had been tested and units activated to support the nation's strategic bomber force. On September 18, 1947, the United States Air Force became a separate armed service. Then on June 1, 1948, the Military Air Transport Service, MATS, was established to manage strategic airlift operations. Within a month, MATS faced an enormous task. When the Western Allies persisted in their efforts to establish an independent West Germany, the Russians blockaded all supply routes to Berlin. Hope for the city emerged when America and its allies initiated Operation Vittles, an air bridge into the city. At the operation's peak, one plane landed every 63 seconds. In all, 2.3 million tons of food, water, medicine, and supplies were airlifted to the beleaguered city. Against the backdrop of the Berlin blockade and the intensifying Cold War, SAC demonstrated that its bomber force could reach any place in the world. In 1949, the Lucky Lady II, a B-50, supported by refuelings, flew non-stop around the world in 94 hours and 1 minute. With scarcely time to catch its breath, the airlift force moved almost immediately from the Berlin airlift to support of U.S. and UN forces in Korea. Air Force aircraft quickly transferred to Far East installations, hit supply lines, and softened up the enemy for the forces airlifted into the theater. MAT's strategic airlift fleet now included the C-97 Stratofreighter and the C-124 Globemaster II, aircraft with huge cargo carrying capability and a globe-spanning reach. MATS did not just deliver critical troops and supplies to the theater. Even more important to some was its mission to medically evacuate wounded soldiers. The Korean War sparked interest in how air refueling procedures could be modified to support not only bombers and reconnaissance aircraft, but also fighters on combat missions. During the Korean War, the converted bombers, B-29Ms, performed a number of firsts for the SAC tanker fleet. The first aerial refuelings under combat conditions, the first refuelings over enemy territory, and the first mass aerial refuelings of jet fighters as they moved from the United States to Japan, nicknamed Fox Peter I and II. The converted bombers were soon replaced by the KC-97A Stratofreighter. The need to provide assistance to victims of disasters, either natural or man-made, is unceasing. In 1952, the U.S. improved its relations in the Middle East by airlifting stranded Muslim pilgrims to Mecca. Hungary, 1956, when 200,000 fled communist oppression, MATS was there, airlifting more than 15,000 refugees to the United States. In 1957, the KC-135A Stratotanker joined the SAC fleet. The KC-135 soon became the standard for air refueling. That same year, the KC-135s joined SAC bombers on alert status. KC-135s in 1961 began supporting the newly launched Post-Attack Command Control System with its airborne command post, the Looking Glass. Tankers supported other special requirements, such as the National Emergency Airborne Command Posts and the highly sophisticated SR-71 reconnaissance aircraft. Again, this time in 1962, the United States sent humanitarian aid to Tanganyika, where 55,000 people were stranded on a flooded river delta. Meanwhile, events were unfolding in a small, obscure country far away in Southeast Asia called Vietnam. At the beginning of the American buildup in Vietnam, there was concern about the aging airlift fleet. Limited load, range, and capabilities were alleviated once the new jet-powered C-141 Starlifter rolled off the production line. But it was not enough. The revised Army strategy and tactics had changed airlift requirements. A large portion of the Army's heavy equipment would not fit in the Starlifters. Becoming operational in 1970, the C-5A Galaxy, with its tremendous outsized payload, made its presence known in Southeast Asia. In Operation Blue Light, C-141s airlifted nearly 3,000 troops and 5,000 tons of equipment of the 3rd Infantry Brigade from Hickam Air Force Base, Hawaii, directly to Pleiku. By November 1967, in Operation Eagle Thrust, the Military Airlift Command's Strategic Airlift Fleet could support a combat delivery movement twice the size of Operation Blue Light. Tactical airlift in Vietnam became increasingly important with the buildup of ground forces. Intra-theater airlift was provided by the C-123 Provider, C-7 Caribou, and C-130 Hercules. Whether they were supporting major operations such as Junction City and the Battle of Khe Sanh or routine supply missions, tactical airlifters proved, as they had in World War II and Korea, that they could deliver the goods wherever needed. During the Vietnam War, SAC KC-135s flew in support of fighter, bomber, special operations, and reconnaissance missions. On numerous occasions, it was the tanker waiting on station, or in some cases going to meet returning aircraft critically low on fuel, that enabled the planes to return to a friendly airfield. In almost 9 years of war, SAC KC-135s performed more than 800,000 in-flight refuelings. Just as the National Guard tanker units supplemented SAC's refueling forces, Air Force Reserve and Air National Guard units augmented MAC when airlift requirements exceeded capabilities. In February 1973, the nation waited anxiously as Operation Homecoming returned America's former POWs. The POWs' jubilation was evident even before the wheels of the C-141 cleared the runway at Hanoi. Families, loved ones, and the nation followed them home. Just as the United States was ending its massive involvement in Vietnam and reducing its force structure, MAC was called upon to conduct a major wartime airlift in support of Israel, Operation Nickel Grass. For 32 days, C-141 and C-5 transports streamed into Lod Airport near Tel Aviv, carrying urgently needed war materials to Israel. Nickel Grass clearly demonstrated the critical importance of aerial refueling to airlift aircraft. A new tanker cargo aircraft had been proposed in 1967, but it was not until March 1981 that the KC-10 extender joined the SAC fleet. When performing its secondary mission, the KC-10 could carry a significant amount of cargo. During the 1970s, airlifters helped make the generosity of the American people a reality, such as the relief abroad to Guatemala, Guam, and Turkey. Even at home, when a heavy snowfall crippled Buffalo, New York. As political unrest in Iran reached the boiling point, Americans in Tehran were airlifted to Europe and then to America. In 1981, the transports returned to the Middle East to pick up the 52 Americans held hostage by Iran. When terrorists bombed the Marine barracks in Beirut in 1983, airlift was there to bring back the wounded and the 241 Americans killed. Grenada, a communist buildup, had become a threat to our Caribbean neighbors, and America responded with Operation Urgent Fury. During the week-long operation, tankers and airlifters rescued American students and ensured a democratic government for the island nation. In 1986, SAC KC-10s and KC-135s made a significant contribution during Operation El Dorado Canyon, the air raid against suspected terrorist strongholds in Libya. The tankers refueled the F-111 strike force. Aerial refueling and airlift forces also played a role when the United States and the Soviet Union agreed to the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. Unfortunately, it was tragedy that brought the two world powers together again in late 1988. The devastating earthquake in Soviet Armenia compelled Chairman Gorbachev to ask for disaster relief assistance. Naturally, the United States delivered. When U.S. citizens were in danger in Panama and the legitimately elected government was prevented from taking power by Manuel Noriega's regime, our government responded with Operation Just Cause. In the first days of August 1990, Iraq's dictator Saddam Hussein used his huge military machine to invade tiny oil-rich Kuwait. Operation Desert Shield was underway within hours of the president's decision. Within 6 weeks, active duty, reserve, and Air National Guard air crews and ground personnel had moved more tons per mile than in the entire Berlin airlift. To augment the United States' airlift capacity, the Civil Reserve Air Fleet was activated for the first time in its 38-year history. As Desert Storm ended, tankers and airlifters became involved in Provide Comfort, a multi-nation relief effort for the Kurds in northern Iraq. A new era in air power history began on June 1, 1992, when the Military Airlift Command and the Strategic Air Command were inactivated, and the Air Mobility Command was formed, integrating the aerial refueling and airlift functions of the two commands into an organization whose mission was to provide the United States with air mobility. The men and women of the new command continued to fly in support of a vast number of requirements, both military and humanitarian. Within a few months, AMC had supported operations in Tajikistan, Bosnia, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Angola, and Somalia. In June 1993, the first operational C-17, the Globemaster III, joined the AMC fleet. The C-17 quickly proved its value. As the world moves rapidly toward the 21st century, AMC provides the mobility necessary to quickly support the nation's objectives, whether it's supporting far-flung military commitments or providing humanitarian aid. AMC truly provides global reach for America.